I didn't know whether anyone was going to come, let alone whether it was going to be any good or anything like that. There was kind of that sense that if we're going to do this, if we're going to, do something together again, it should be something special, and it should be something worthwhile, so that if it is horrible and we decide we're not going to do it, the last thing we did was something good, rather than kind of some grubby little kind of money grabbing thing. And I think for me that made it kind of, I don't know, there was just this feeling that the band had really fizzled out, and that if this was the last thing that we did, then it was a great thing to have done. It was the kind of the reaction to it was. I mean, it took me by surprise. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
It's kind of, I don't know. So people just kind of came out of the woodwork. I don't know if it's just that thing that when a band splits up, people just think, "I better not mention it." You know what I mean? So it's kind of like when a couple have split up, and you go and see them and you don't mention their other half. It's kind of like people didn't really talk to me about Suede for a long time. And then just suddenly when we did the Royal Albert Hall, suddenly all these people came out of the woodwork. People I'd worked with and people I'd known. Oh, by the way, I was a massive Suede fan. And it was quite strange to get this kind of outpouring of kind of, I don't know, I was going to say love, but that's probably too strong. This outpouring of from people.
It was wonderful that evening. Actually, it was It was possibly my favourite gig we've ever done. It was kind of amazing. It was such an emotional night. Partly because, like Matt says, we didn't really know what it was going to be like and how people were going to respond and stuff. And it was great.
And we played Metal Mickey, and there was literally people wouldn't stop clapping. It's kind of like this ovation that seemed to last for hours. It probably lasted for about 30 seconds, but at the time it wasn't really incredible.
That was kind of the moment that it was clear to me that we were going to have to do something else. You know what I mean? It was kind of you literally just thought, well, it's ridiculous to not do this again.
Yeah, and because originally we thought we'd just do this Albert Hall show and that would be like a one-off, and we genuinely thought, well, let's just do it and be cool, and it'd be a really cool idea, and just do one show and not follow it up, and then we couldn't leave it alone, could we?
You can't. You just keep picking at it.
Couldn't leave it alone.
Well, really, after that, we got millions of offers even before we'd done the Royal Albert Hall, and we kind of said, right, we're not going to say yes to anything. But after the Albert Hall, we just started basically playing either places that we really liked, you know what I mean, kind of Japan, Sweden, places where we'd had amazing experiences. And then we played a load of places that we'd never been before. You know what I mean? There's something amazing about doing a gig where people haven't had a chance to see you, or where people have been waiting to see you. And I think it's really, it would be really easy to fall into a kind of nostalgia trap, and there's something great about going to kind of Korea or Chile or somewhere like that, where you're kind of a new band. For me, that's been the best thing about doing this since then. It's going to these places where you're just a new band, and there's people there who've been waiting 20 years to see you, and there's people who are 18 and have just seen you on YouTube.
Yeah, I think after we'd been touring for a while, playing kind of essentially greatest hit sets, we sort of thought, well, we've got two choices here. We can't really carry on doing this and look ourselves in the mirror and feel proud about ourselves playing songs from 20 years ago. After a while, I think you have to kind of you have to sort of go forward artistically, and I think you have to write new music, otherwise it becomes a bit of a sort of self-parody, I think. And so we thought, okay, well, we're going to try and write a new record, because that's what we have to do to kind of justify playing together, and we kind of like decided we all wanted to carry on playing together for a while. So we thought, okay, we're going to try and make a new record, see how it goes. And the kind of, you know, the attitude at first was very much, let's see what happens, let's write a couple of songs, and, you know, if it's no good, then we'll maybe call it a day, and if it's good, then we'll carry on. And you know, we started writing, I suppose, God, the end of 2011, something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
2011, was it?
Yeah, easily. I think.
Of course it was, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh,
Kind of, almost like the middle of 2011.
Yeah.
People kind of
We were sort of fiddling around, yeah.
throwing stuff at each other.
Yeah, and at first it didn't really come together quite right. Actually, it was kind of it took a while. I think there was a point where we were sort of, you know, I was sort of really questioning whether we should be doing this, and then it kind of came together. And I think that you know, there was the period at the start where it wasn't really working. It's almost like, well, you know, when a band first forms, it's almost like learning it all again. When a band first forms, the first song that you write as a new band isn't, you know, no one ever hears it. It's kind of, it gets lost, and because it's not very good. And that whole first period of writing was us kind of like, you know, getting to know how to write with each other again. And
Yeah, well, when we formed the band, we wrote literally hundreds of awful songs.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to do
Every
that
band
before
yeah.
you get to the good ones.
Yeah.
And when Richard joined, it was the same thing. You know, you have to start from scratch, and kind of it's not one of those things. Just because you can play live together doesn't mean you can write together. You know, it's a weirdly fragile thing, isn't it?
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's the fact that everyone can do their part doesn't mean that it's going to kind of chemically come together in a way that's swayed. You know.
Plus, making a kind of a comeback record after 10 years away is a very, very tricky thing to get right, I think, because you've got to walk this tightrope between being yourself and sounding like yourself, but not sounding like a self-parody and not sounding dated. And, you know, obviously a real temptation to kind of like make the record sound like Coming Up or something like that. You know, we really didn't want that. But at the same time, it had to be a Suede record. You can't come back after 10 years and sort of reinvent yourself. That would just be stupid. You know, it's kind of like coming back and reforming the band with non-original, you know, kind of people that weren't in the band in the first place.
Well, yeah,
like
if you're going to do something completely different, then do a solo record. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It had to be a Suede record. So it was a very tricky kind of balancing act, which took a while to kind of like get the tone of it right. But when it started working really well. It
was interesting working with Ed Buller, the producer, because he'd worked on the first 3 records, and it's quite weird working with someone who knows you that well, you know, and has worked with us for such a long time, because he literally every now and then would kind of hear something that he thought was the sound of Suede, that I at first I couldn't really work out what he was talking about. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was a couple of times, especially with your voice, where he was kind of like, that's it.
Yeah.
And it was only really when the record was finished and we were going through something in the studio and we had to play like kind of 10 seconds of each one. And suddenly I heard it all together, and there's a kind of, I don't know, there's a kind of level of kind of hysteria to a lot of the songs.
Yeah.
That was suddenly kind of, right, I almost hear what he hears.
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
There's a kind of tension to it and a kind of uneasiness to it that I think he was missing with what we'd done later on, and that was quite a strange experience. That, you know, to have someone who knows you really well go, no, you're not.
Knows you better than you do.
Yeah, you're not doing that. You're not doing that the Suede way.
Yeah. I think Ed was hugely important in the making of the record. Hugely influential. You know, the record wouldn't be anything like what it turned out to be if it wasn't for Ed. He was so the right choice to have as the producer on the record. You know, he's one of these people that just so cares about the band. He kind of made his name making Suede records, and, you know, kind of we made our name with him as well. And it's this sort of symbiotic thing where he's really one of the family, and he really cares about, you know, about the band, which is you can't buy.
And he knows us well enough to be brutal. I mean, I think
And
that's
he was
one of the
brutal.
things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He knew us well enough to go, God,
Yeah.
that's awful.
Yeah, and
You know what I mean?
regularly.
Some great thing that you thought you'd written, you know what I mean? And then we'd rehearse together, and you'd bring it in, and it'd be like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, he could be crushing about it, but that was what was necessary at times. yeah, the title Blood Sports is it's a kind of reference to the kind of carnal cut and thrust of relationships, the kind of endless sort of kind of chase and gain that you find yourself in relationships, and that's very much the kind of lyrical cut, sort of angle of the album. It was initially the idea was that I wanted it to be almost not a concept album, that sort of sounds, but to have a kind of like a narrative, where it'd be the first song would be about meeting someone, and the last song would be about splitting up, and in between you'd have all these different phases like infatuation and codependency and obsession, all these sorts of things, and suspicion, and all of these songs would deal with a different kind of emotion, jealousy or whatever. And that was the idea. It was kind of inspired by this book called Essays in Love, which is exactly that. It's like the start, the end of a relationship from start to the end. It starts and ends with you. And that's what the idea for the album was. And then obviously, if you try and be too theoretical about it, you compromise it musically. So inevitably, the kind of like the strict structure of that got compromised. But that was the core of the idea, and it's still the album is all songs about these various emotions. Something like Sometimes I Feel I Float Away is very much about codependency, and Always is very much about obsession, and Snowblind is about infatuation. So these kind of like things, it does kind of work, but it's kind of more jumbled up than I initially conceived it to be. Yeah, the artwork for the album sleeve, it was, I suppose, it mirrored what I wanted for the music. For it to be a kind of, for it to have a kind of very strong sort of suede identity, but for it to kind of be a slightly updated, evolved version.
It took forever, actually, didn't it? I mean, it did take a long time. It was one of those things that I think we knew exactly how it was supposed to look, but you have to go, because we're musicians, not designers, it takes quite a long time to actually get to that point, doesn't it? I remember you actually looking through thousands of pictures and kind of coming in and saying, right, I've narrowed it down to the kind of like these 800.
I did. I've literally got a file on my computer which has got literally hundreds of images. I was just going on these websites. So that's what I wanted to do. Actually, initially I wanted to kind of do what I did with the first few albums, because I just found these images in books and just plonked the name Suede on it, sort of thing. And that became the album sleeve. And I sort of wanted to do that, go back to that idea, but I couldn't quite find the right image. And I went through all these kind of like image banks and websites and blah blah, and I couldn't find it. So we got there's some guys these guys from Studio Baron. Studio Baron, isn't it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they'd done some really interesting stuff, and they seemed to really get what we wanted to do. And we staged a shoot with some couples basically sort of fighting on a bed, and the idea was that I wanted to capture a kind of an image that was ambiguous, that you couldn't really tell whether they were kind of making love or making war, and I kind of wanted it to have that kind of ambiguity in the same way that it kind of reflected the themes on the record. So that's the idea for that. You can answer that one.
Why does Suede matter in 2013? I think the same reason that we mattered in 1993 and 2000 and whatever. I think there's something we do. There's a kind of passionate, heart on your sleeve, live kind of feeling to the band that not a lot of people do really well. It was interesting that this record kind of came out of playing live and just remembering I think just the kind of the power and the heart of what it sounds like to just make this noise. You know what I mean? I think more than anything, we make a big, interesting noise.
I don't think anyone really sounds like Suede, actually. I don't think that.